Welcome to Grammar, y'all. Today we're going to talk about participles and participial phrases. It's important to note that participles can function both as verbs and adjectives. In today's video, we're just going to talk about the ones that function as adjectives. Today's video is set up in two sections. The first section is going to go over the definition, the placement, and the punctuation that your students need to know. The second section is going to go over what I think of as like the gray areas of this rule, things that your students don't necessarily need to know up front, but you as the teacher will benefit from knowing it because your students might get confused or might make the mistakes in the gray area, and then you'll be able to talk about it with them. So what is a participle? A participle is a verb form that ends in ing, ed, or en. It functions as an adjective and should be in close proximity to the noun that it modifies. Here are a couple of examples. Grinning, they walked into the amusement park. Her grinning sister looked up from her ice cream. Grinning in anticipation of a good grade, they waited for the results to load. Now, as you can see in these model sentences here, participial phrases can go at the beginning of a sentence, the middle of the sentence, or at the end of a sentence. The only thing you need to be thinking about when putting it at the beginning, the middle, or the end is to make sure that its placement is close enough to the noun that it's modifying so that it's clear. We also have participles that can act as what we always think of as an adjective, the ones that go directly before the noun they're modifying, as in these examples. So let's move on to punctuation. We want to put commas around participles and participial phrases. And that is true whether the participial phrase goes at the beginning of the sentence, the middle of the sentence, or the end of a sentence. Obviously, if the participle is in the noun phrase, like these here, you don't put a comma around it. So at this point, we've covered the definition, the placement, and the punctuation to the extent that your students need to know. Now we're going to move on into that gray area I talked about. It is true that a participle is a verb form that ends in ing, ed, or en. However, participles can also end in n and t, but these are way less common than the other three endings, so it's better just not to muddy the water. But it's important that you as the teacher know that these constructions can occur. Sometimes your students might get confused whether a participle is actually a participle or whether it's just a regular old adjective. There's a hack to help your students identify this. Take the word out of the sentence and turn it into a to plus verb construction, otherwise known as an infinitive. So we have the phrase an exciting game. If your student's not sure if it's a participle, take out exciting and have them put it in to excite. Totally makes sense. That's a participle. But if we have the phrase a talented singer, we're going to take that word out, put it in the to construction, to talent. Nope, that is not a participle. Let's talk again about the placement. So there are two ways that students can use participles that might confuse their reader. The first one is a misplaced modifier, and the second one is a dangling participle. So let's go over both of those real quickly. When we're talking about where a participle goes in a sentence, proximity is important, but clarity is the number one concern. As we see in these examples, we have participles at the beginning, the middle, and the end, and sometimes they're right next to the noun that they're modifying, but as in number 3, it's not directly next to the noun that it's modifying, but it still makes sense. However, we can cause some confusion if we put a bunch of nouns between the noun that's being modified and the participle, as we can see in these sentences here. This is called a misplaced modifier. The noun that it's modifying is in the sentence, but it's so far away from it, we get a little confused. Here are a couple of more examples. Now let's talk about the dangling participle. The dangling participle is a little bit different from a misplaced modifier because the noun that the participle is modifying isn't even in the sentence. So I say walking into the classroom, the lights seemed unusually bright. That's kind of saying that the lights were walking into the classroom, and I don't think they can do that. My noun that is being modified by the participle is not even present. But if I say walking into the classroom, I thought the lights seemed unusually bright, boom! The noun, in this case a pronoun, that the participial phrase is modifying is in the sentence, and we fix our dangling participle. Another example would be finishing the assignment. The bell rang loudly. Well, a bell isn't going to finish an assignment. So we need to say finishing the assignment. I was startled when the bell rang loudly. So again, I'm putting in the thing that modifies the participial phrase. And I fix that dangling participle. And for those really staunch grammar lovers out there, there is a rule about a participle at the end of a sentence and punctuation. And I want to go over it real quickly. When the participle ends the sentence, we can get into the discussion of whether that participial phrase is restrictive or non-restrictive and whether we need commas because it's restrictive or non-restrictive. Here's why I don't even touch that with adolescents. Because we're not teaching them to be copy editors, and copy editors are probably some of the only people who know this rule. And that's it. That's participles and participial phrases. Thanks so much for joining me. Y'all take care of yourselves. Our goal is to make our students rhetorically savvy language users. Again, our goal is to make our don't go down. Our goal is to make our students rhetorically savvy language users. Again, our goal is to make our students rhetorically savvy language users, not copy editors. I gave you plenty of bloopers.
I was holding it in for that last 30 seconds.